This lesson is about the double check valve assembly. What it is an assembly of two check valves, independent, that has capabilities to test each one and repair each one of these check valves. If we look here at the construction, if we look at our direction of flow is going this direction, we have two shutoff valves, a number one and a number two shutoff valve. This one doesn't have a handle on it. I've got this one for a reason to show you. But we also have four test cocks. Number one is actually on the outside of our number one shutoff valve, so we can relieve pressure on the main line between here and the meter. And we can also do some other things with this, check the pressure and so forth. But that one's here. We've got our number two and number three are on each side of our number one check valve, and then test cocks number 3 and 4 are on each side of our number 2 check valve, and then of course we've got our second shutoff valve here. Now we can take this apart. I'm going to take this one apart at the end of the video just to show you that it's no big deal at all. These things are not a problem to rebuild. Usually the biggest problem is with these is that they're usually mounted underground in pits and that they're hard to get to just to rebuild, and some of the forms actually have the opposing check valves here. You'll see it in the RPPA lecture, how they're put together there, but it's just a form to save just a little bit of space or whatever. But as we look here, they're going to either come with resilient ball valves or resilient gate valves. My problem with the ball valve handles is they're all like this, and it's like, galvanized steel or whatever this is, and it rusts off really easy. So you can even see the rust falling off of this one here. And a lot of times these, if they're not mounted right, if they not put some pea gravel or something in the bottom of the box to help drain off the water, if these things sit in water, number one, it could be a potential cross-contamination, because in a situation of back siphonage, you could get water being pulled through the test cocks or the fittings right here around our shutoff valves. And also sitting in water rust these handles off. And I always keep a couple of extra ones. There's a small and a large for the 3/4 and 1 inch devices that you're generally going to be dealing with. And I try to keep 2 of each on the truck, just because a lot of times when you run up on these, both of the handles are going to be rusted off, and in most of the time this is going to be your isolation valve for the entire irrigation system. So I don't like to leave my customers without a way of isolating the irrigation system. Now sometimes this is going to be connected to a second meter, so you have another shut off before you get to the backflow preventer, which is on a meter or a curb stop. And if you're just turning the irrigation system on and off, I suggest you do it from a meter or a curb stop instead of doing it here on the backflow preventer, because this is the customer's responsibility. The meter or curb stop is usually the city's responsibility, and if something breaks there, it's on them to fix. You fool around and break one of these off while you're shutting the irrigation system on and off, well, now you've got to fix it so that you can complete the rest of your job. So I don't cut these on and off unless I just have to, but there's 2 on here for the testing purposes, but we're not talking about testing. But let's talk about another kind. So this is the resilient ball valve, and we also have resilient gate valves that are on this here, and these are older units. That the older 3/4 and 1 inch units, you may see these on, and sometimes when you get to the larger backflow preventers, the 2 inches and above, all of them will have the gate valves on them. The only thing I want to point out is that on the older ones, and you can tell the age on them but just by how much they've rusted, is that a lot of times that these will break off, the stem will break off down inside of here, and it'll be partially closed, so that sometimes you can't tell that there's a problem here. All you'll be able to see is that your irrigation system has low pressure. So in the troubleshooting video in this course, you can see a few ways to figure that out. But I wanted to show you this other form here, that it's not too independent modules that have the check valves in them, but it's one piece here. And to rebuild this, you would take the one section off here, and each of the check modules go back in here. And sometimes these have a spacer, or they just fit back up into here. And when you put this on, it holds them apart, right? Everyone's a little bit different, and I promise you, once you've taken one or two of these apart, that it's going to be no big deal. But I hope that you have something similar to this 950 XL, I believe that's what I have here, a 950 XLT from Zern Wilkins. And we're going to take this thing apart just to show you how easy it is. I like for these skill builder exercises, if you've got one, if you can follow along, I would like for you to put your hands on it and rebuild one of these, just so that you'll have the confidence that when you get out in the field that you think, hey, I've done this before, I've even seen that one before, no problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Okay, let's take one of these modules apart here. I've already kind of cracked this open a little bit. If you're having a hard time with these, a little bit of WD-40 does wonders for breaking this apart. And so I usually try to keep a clean cloth. I keep a lot of clean rags and the disposable rags that you get in a box. I keep a lot of those around just to have a clean surface to lay things out on. So we're going to undo this piece here, and when you take it off, you have your cap, you have a spring, there's an O-ring usually just right inside this lip here. Sometimes you'll see the O-ring down inside of there, but this one's right on the lip. Everyone's a little bit different. And now we have our poppet, or our plunger, and that's part of what happens there, and it's the spring that's holding it back. Now the spring is set to hold back 1 psi of pressure, or it's actually the spring is a 1 psi spring, and it's loaded like that, so for one, to help close the valve, but for two, to give it a little bit of bite pressure in case there's a little something that gets lodged in the seat there, that the spring has a little bit of bite to push through it. And when the test is performed on the device, it's basically just back pressuring 1 psi onto the spring to make sure it can hold it. So if we have a problem and you're rebuilding it, always put your finger down in there and feel around. There's a seat inside of here, a plastic or nylon seat that your poppet sets down on. Now it has a little gasket that's on here, and you can replace those gaskets. Almost always this thing, when you buy it, a replacement part, it just comes solid like this, already put together, but you can take those apart. But there's a little piece down in there, the seat, and you want to take your finger and feel around and make sure that it's not cracked or doesn't have anything stuck into it. So you'll be surprised sometimes the little pieces of PVC or metal that comes through the line, and it'll get lodged down in these things. But just, stick your fingers down in there and just make sure that there's nothing clogging it up. And so let's put it back together here. Okay, we're going to put our plunger or our poppet in there. We've got our spring, and now let's not forget our O-ring. And usually when you buy the replacement kits for this, it comes with a little bit of grease for your O-ring. Don't neglect that. It definitely, just a little tiny film of grease on any O-ring is going to help it last. But for these, only use the approved grease that comes with it. There's a particular EPA approved grease for use on these things, so only use that. So you take that, and it's got to center right down on top of that just right. And then we're going to push it in. And when you push it down, before you completely screw it all the way back in, just go back around and make sure that your O-ring is in its seat. And then when you finally seal it up here all the way, that you're not pinching it and creasing that O-ring. It's no big deal if it's got a little bit of grease on it. Usually it sticks down in its lip. We're going to put this back together and then just tighten it up good here, and we're going to be done.